It began with the sound of shattering glass. Jennifer Cole had just set her mug of chamomile tea on the nightstand and was reaching to turn off her bedside lamp when the noise jolted her heart into her throat. It wasn't the casual clink of a picture frame falling. It was sharp, violent, purposeful. Downstairs, her first thought was Emily. Her daughter was brushing her teeth in the bathroom across the hall. Jennifer pushed herself out of bed, bare feet cold on the hardwood floor, pulse racing. She padded into the hall, whispering urgently, "Em, stay in the bathroom." Locked the door. But she didn't even have time to see if her daughter obeyed before the intruders came. 3 figures in black ski masks stormed the hallway, moving with terrifying speed. One carried a handgun fitted with suppressor. Another hefted a duffel bag. The third held duct tape, already torn and ready. Jennifer screamed, but the sound was muffled as the tallest intruder slammed her against the wall, pressing cold steel to her temple. "Don't fight. Don't scream. Do what we say if you want your kid alive." Her mind spun. "Oh, God. Oh, God. Please don't let them hurt Emily." The bathroom door creaked, and 12-year-old Emily peeked out, toothbrush still in hand, eyes wide with confusion. In a flash, one of the masked women grabbed her, yanking her into the hall. Emily cried out. A muffled panic sound cut short as duct tape was slapped across her mouth. The 3 intruders moved with uncanny precision, almost rehearsed. Jennifer and Emily were dragged into the living room, forced onto the floor. Their wrists were bound, mouths gagged, ankles taped. Then came the words that turned the night from a home invasion into a nightmare of unimaginable scale. "You're going to rob your bank for us tomorrow. And to make sure you don't try anything stupid." The woman with the duffel bag unzipped it, revealing blocks wrapped in red tape with wires dangling. Crude but unmistakable. Bombs. Jennifer's heart stopped. They strapped one around her waist, then another around Emily's small torso. The weight was heavy, the wires brushing against her skin, the tape bundles pressing into them like death itself. One of the masked women leaned in close to Jennifer's ear. Her voice was low, calm, almost soothing, chilling in its steadiness. "You'll drive to the bank at opening. You'll take out exactly what we tell you. If you talk, if you run, if you disobey, boom. Both of you." Jennifer couldn't breathe. She nodded furiously, her tears soaking to the tape across her mouth. The intruders didn't leave. They stayed through the night, pacing the house, checking their watches, whispering in code names: Raven, Sable, Fox. Every hour dragged like a year, and every second, Jennifer's eyes drifted to her daughter, who lay trembling on the carpet, bound and gagged with bombs strapped around her tiny body. To understand the sheer shock of what was unfolding inside Jennifer Cole's home that November night, you have to picture Glendale, Arizona. It wasn't Phoenix's bustling sprawl, but a quieter suburb, a place of cul-de-sacs where kids rode bikes until sunset, where neighbors waved while mowing their lawns, where everyone assumed safety was a given. Jennifer, 38, had been part of that fabric for years. She wasn't flashy, a widow who had lost her husband to a sudden heart attack 6 years earlier. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece. Work at the bank kept her busy. Raising Emily gave her purpose. Her colleagues describe her as steady, dependable, the kind of manager who remembered birthdays and stayed late to help a teller balance the drawer. Emily was a pride, a sweet-natured, poetry-writing, soccer-loving 12-year-old who still held Jennifer's hand crossing busy streets. This was not a family destined for headlines. Not until 3 masked women decided to use their love as leverage for one of the boldest crimes Glendale had ever seen. The night stretched endlessly. Jennifer and Emily were forced to lie on the floor, their movements restricted by the fake dynamite. Occasionally, the women would tighten the tape or adjust the wires, making sure the bombs looked ready to detonate. The leader, Raven, was unmistakable even in a mask. Tall, muscular, her voice a controlled monotone. She carried herself like someone used to giving orders. Sable, smaller and twitchier, seemed nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she paced. She hummed under her breath. Snippets of a lullaby. Fox was the youngest, the one who taped Emily's wrists more gently than the others. But her eyes darted constantly, betraying nerves. Jennifer tried desperately to memorize their mannerisms. She couldn't see their faces, but she could feel their personalities radiating through their movements, their speech. At one point, Raven crouched beside her. "You're going to withdraw $360,000. No more, no less. We know the vault routines. We know your codes. Don't test us." Jennifer tried to nod, her heart hammering. "You do this right, you both live. You cross us, you die." Raven patted the fake dynamite on Emily's chest as if it were a doll's toy. Emily whimpered through the gag, tears streaking her cheeks. Jennifer's maternal instinct screamed to fight, to claw, to do something. But the cold logic of the situation smothered her rage. One wrong move, and her daughter would be gone. The clock ticked. Minutes bled into hours. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison cell. Just before dawn, Raven stood and stretched. She looked at her partners. Time to go to work. The morning sun painted Glendale in soft gold, but for Jennifer Cole, the world had turned gray. She sat behind the wheel of her sedan, hands trembling on the steering wheel, the weight of the fake bomb pressing into her stomach. Emily sat rigid in the back seat, wide-eyed and silent, the wires from her own device brushing against her chin. Raven sat in the passenger seat, gun concealed under her jacket. Fox and Sable followed in a dark SUV. As they neared Glendale Federal Credit Union, Jennifer's breath came shallow and fast. She had walked into that building hundreds of times before. Cheerful greetings, coffee brewing, paperwork stacked neatly. Today, it was the site of her forced betrayal. At precisely 8 a.m., she pushed open the glass door, greeting her staff with what she hoped was a smile. Her teller, Sandra, noticed her pallor. "You okay, Jen? You look pale." Jennifer forced a laugh. Didn't sleep much. Her legs felt like lead as she walked to the vault. She inserted her key into the code, and the heavy door swung open with a hiss. Her hands shook as she pulled out stacks of bills, stuffing them into canvas bags. Every second she imagined Emily outside, bombs strapped to her chest, waiting for her mother not to make a mistake. By 8:15, she was back in the car. She handed the bags over to Raven, who calmly zipped them shut and gave Jennifer a nod. "You did good." The SUV pulled alongside them. Raven opened the door, stepped out with the bags, and slid into the other vehicle. "Drive home. You'll get your daughter back." Then, just like that, they were gone. Jennifer clutched Emily and sobbed, both of them still bound with the fake bombs, until police sirens filled the air. The bomb squad would later confirm what the women already knew. The devices were crude fakes, incapable of detonating, but the terror they inflicted was as real as any explosion. And the money, $360,000 in cash, was gone. By noon that day, Glendale was no longer a quiet suburb. The cul-de-sac where Jennifer Cole lived was barricaded with police tape. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes angled toward the sky. Neighbors huddled in clusters, whispering in disbelief. Jennifer? Our Jennifer? The bank manager? And her little girl? With bombs? Cameras zoomed in on the house as bomb squad technicians in bulky protective suits carried out the fake explosives. To the cameras, they looked like real dynamite. Red sticks wired together, black tape cinched tight. Only later would it be revealed they were nothing more than painted wood and wires connected to simple timers. But to Jennifer and Emily, they had been death itself. Reporters shouted questions as Jennifer was escorted to a waiting cruiser. She kept her arm wrapped protectively around her daughter, shielding Emily's tear-streaked face. The headlines that evening were brutal and sensational. Mother and daughter strapped with bombs and bank robbery terror. Glendale's quiet streets rocked by crime straight from a movie. Masked women turned bank manager into hostage robber. Jennifer's colleagues were stunned. Sandra, the teller, later recalled, "She looked not like herself. When she went into that vault, I thought something was wrong, but you don't imagine it's that. You don't imagine she's got her child wired with explosives." For Glendale residents, the horror was amplified by the strangeness of the culprits. 3 women, not men, not gang members with tattoos and wrapped sheets, but women, masked, yes, but unmistakably female. The town buzzed with questions. Who were they? Why here? And how did they know so much about Jennifer, her bank, and her life? Detective Marcus Leary, a 15-year veteran of Glendale PD, took lead on the case. He was known for his patience and meticulous nature, qualities this labyrinth of a crime would demand. The crime scene team cataloged everything. The broken living room window, the duct tape used to bind Jennifer and Emily, the fake bombs, shoe prints near the back fence, one with a worn tread consistent with women's boots. Leary interviewed Jennifer for hours. Her voice trembled as she described the intruders. Their code names: Raven, Sable, Fox. The way Raven's voice was calm, controlled, almost military. The way Sable hummed nervously. The way Fox, the youngest, seemed almost reluctant. They knew everything, Jennifer whispered. The exact time I opened the vault, the procedures, even my schedule. They'd been watching me for weeks, maybe months. Leary frowned. Inside knowledge. That was unusual. The first 48 hours were chaos. Leads poured in. A neighbor reported a dark SUV idling on the street the night before. A clerk at a gas station swore 3 women had come in that morning, paying in cash for fuel. A delivery driver claimed he saw something weird near the bank. But as quickly as tips came in, they evaporated. And worse, whispers began to spread. Could Jennifer have staged it? It wasn't unheard of for bank employees to orchestrate inside jobs. Detectives had seen it before. Feigned kidnappings, staged robberies. Jennifer's emotional testimony. The bombs that turned out to be fake. The fact that she walked out of the bank alone. All of it raised suspicion in some corners. Leary, though, wasn't convinced. He'd sat across from plenty of liars in interrogation rooms. Jennifer's tears weren't rehearsed. Her daughter's trauma wasn't fake. Still, the case was stuck, until the FBI stepped in. The FBI brought resources Glendale PD didn't have. Interstate databases, behavioral analysts, the capacity to cross-check similar crimes. And it turned out Glendale wasn't the first. 2 years earlier, in Reno, Nevada, a credit union manager had been forced at gunpoint to rob her own bank after her husband was threatened. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, a bank teller was wired with what she thought was a bomb. Both cases were unsolved. In each, witnesses described masked women. That pattern pointed to the culprits Jennifer had named: Raven, Sable, Fox. The profiles built by investigators painted a picture of 3 women with unusual dynamics. Raven Victoria Hale, 34, a former Army explosives technician, dishonorably discharged for misconduct, known for discipline, tactical knowledge, and cold detachment. Sable Marissa Cortez, 29, once a preschool teacher, fired for erratic behavior, history of shoplifting, petty theft, and an abusive relationship that left her emotionally volatile. Fox Dana Price, 25, a drifter with a history of fraud and car theft, charismatic but unstable, the face of the group who charmed people before turning dangerous. They called themselves the Valkyries, a name Raven allegedly coined. In Norse mythology, Valkyries were female warriors who chose who lived and who died. To Raven, it was a symbol of power, but investigators were puzzled. How had this odd trio managed such surgical precision? They weren't dumb criminals. They had targeted Jennifer with terrifying accuracy. The answer came with the first big breakthrough. Detective Leary noticed something odd during an interview with Jennifer. She mentioned that the intruders knew not only her vault access, but also her personal schedule. Even that she sometimes stopped at a particular coffee shop on Wednesdays. That wasn't information you could gather from watching a house. That was insider knowledge. The FBI began combing through past employees of Glendale Federal Credit Union. That's when a name resurfaced: Gerald Whitman. Whitman had been the branch manager before Jennifer. Fired 3 years earlier from mismanagement, he left bitter and disgraced. Some employees recalled his rants about how the bank ruined me. Leary and his team tracked him down. Gerald was 52 now, balding, living in a modest apartment in Phoenix. When questioned, he seemed polite, cooperative even. But something gnawed at Leary. Gerald claimed he hadn't kept in touch with anyone from the bank. Yet phone records told a different story. In the months before the robbery, he'd made dozens of late-night calls to a prepaid cell phone later tied to Raven Hale. Even more damning, during the interview, Gerald slipped, He mentioned the exact amount stolen, $360,000. That detail hadn't been released to the public. Leary filed it in his mind. Gerald Whitman wasn't just a bitter ex-manager. He was looking more and more like a puppet master. But Gerald wasn't the only surprise. While reviewing reports, Leary noticed inconsistencies in the initial patrol logs. A dark SUV had been reported by multiple neighbors the night before, but the official log from Deputy Charles Chuck Halverson noted no unusual activity. Halverson was a 20-year veteran of the sheriff's department, well-liked in town. He volunteered at high school football games, waved at kids from his patrol car. But beneath that image, Halverson carried a secret: gambling debts. Detectives soon discovered large cash deposits in his bank account, deposits made just days after the robbery. Even stranger, phone records showed calls between Halverson and Gerald Whitman in the weeks leading up to the crime. It became clear Halverson had provided the Valkyries and Gerald with critical intel, patrol patterns, police response times, even gossip about Jennifer's routines. A cop on the inside. The realization sent shivers through the investigative team. This wasn't just a gang of women. This was a conspiracy involving a disgraced manager and a corrupt deputy, a web of betrayal stretching from the bank's past to the very heart of law enforcement. For Jennifer and Emily, the nightmare had ended in the living room. For detectives, it was only beginning. Detective Marcus Leary sat in the task force war room, staring at the web of photos, phone records, and maps tacked to the corkboard. In the center were the three Valkyries: Raven, Sable, Fox. Lines of red strings stretched outward, connecting them to Gerald Whitman, the ex-manager, and Deputy Halverson. The picture was becoming clearer. The Valkyries were the muscle and execution. Gerald was the strategist, the one with grudges, insider knowledge, and the cold mind to weaponize it. Halverson was the inside shield, the guarantee that when Glendale PD responded, they'd already be two steps behind. But clarity wasn't enough. They needed proof. The FBI authorized surveillance. Gerald's Phoenix apartment was bugged. His movements were tailed. He proved to be cautious, spending long hours in a seedy bar where he drank whiskey alone. Yet every few days, he made a call from a payphone, old school, paranoid. One evening, the wiretap caught a phrase that electrified the task force. Gerald muttered, "The girls are getting sloppy. Halverson better keep his mouth shut." It was the first time he directly acknowledged a conspiracy. Meanwhile, a parallel team dug into Halverson. They placed a GPS tracker on his cruiser and monitored his financials. What they found was damning. Weekly visits to a casino 2 counties over. Cash buy-ins that matched almost exactly with the unexplained deposits in his account. The plan was working. The walls were closing in. But Raven, Sable, and Fox were still out there. And they weren't idle. The break came from a small detail. A warehouse manager on the outskirts of Phoenix reported something odd. 3 women renting a storage unit, paying in cash, always arriving at night. He hadn't thought much of it until he saw the televised sketches of the Valkyries. Agents rushed to the facility. From a distance, they monitored the unit. 2 nights later, the suspect arrived in a black SUV. Surveillance photos confirmed it. Raven, Sable, Fox. They carried duffel bags inside, stayed less than 10 minutes, then drove off. The FBI moved quickly, with a judge's signature. They cracked the lock at dawn. Inside, the unit looked like a miniature armory. Fake dynamite sticks, identical to those strapped to Jennifer and Emily. Detailed floor plans of Glendale Federal Credit Union. A whiteboard scrawled with words: Jennifer, leverage; Emily, insurance. And perhaps most chilling, cutouts from local newspapers about other bank employees, other potential targets. This wasn't a one-off. The Valkyries had been running scenarios, selecting victims like names on a hit list. One of the duffel bags yielded something even more useful: a partial fingerprint. It matched Dana Price, Fox. Finally, they had something hard enough for warrants. The pressure mounted. Agents picked up Dana Price, Fox, first. They caught her leaving a motel on the Nevada border. Unlike Raven, Dana lacked the steel nerves. Within hours of interrogation, she cracked. "I didn't want to do it anymore," she sobbed. Raven, She's the one. She said Whitman promised us big money. Said Halverson would protect us. She confirmed the task force's suspicions. Gerald Whitman was the mastermind. Deputy Halverson was their inside man. Dana's cooperation painted a vivid picture. Raven was ruthless, obsessed with control. Sable was unstable, prone to panic attacks, but loyal to Raven like a sister. Dana had been swept in by promises of money and belonging, but the fear had eaten her alive. Raven said we were Valkyries. Dana whispered. She said we chose who lived and who died. But I didn't sign up for scaring kids. I didn't sign up for bombs. With Dana's testimony, the prosecutors had leverage, but Raven and Sable were still free and dangerous. It was time to confront Gerald Whitman. Leary and 2 FBI agents visited his Phoenix apartment under the guise of a follow-up interview. Gerald greeted them in a stained T-shirt, feigning surprise. When they slid a folder across the table, phone logs, fingerprints, Dana Price's signed statement. His face hardened. "Dana's a liar," he muttered. "You think a washed-up thief like me could plan all that? Please." But as the evidence piled up, Gerald's mask slipped. You know what it's like? He snapped suddenly. You give your life to a place, build it from the ground up, and one mistake, and they toss you like garbage. Jennifer Cole took my job. She sat in my chair. She looked down her nose at me. She deserved a little scare. A little scare? Leary asked quietly. You strap bombs to a child. Gerald slammed his fist on the table. They weren't real. The outburst sealed it. Gerald had just admitted knowledge of the bombs. Knowledge only a conspirator would have. He was arrested that night, charged with conspiracy, kidnapping, and armed robbery. But even as he was led away in cuffs, Gerald smirked. You'll never catch Raven, he said. She's smarter than all of you. The Halverson arrest was trickier. Deputies are family in small towns. Exposing one as corrupt threatened the department's reputation. Sheriff Donnelly himself struggled with it, pacing outside the briefing room. But the evidence was ironclad. Bank deposits, casino trips, phone calls with Gerald, Dana's testimony. When they finally moved in, Halverson was at home, polishing his patrol boots. He didn't resist. He simply sat on his porch, head bowed, as his colleagues cuffed him. The betrayal cut deep. Reporters swarmed the courthouse when Halverson was arraigned. For Glendale residents, seeing the uniform they trusted paraded as part of conspiracy was almost harder to swallow than the robbery itself. Leary summed it up grimly in a press conference. When the people sworn to protect us join hands with criminals, the damage goes beyond money. It erodes trust, and trust is the foundation of any community. Halverson said little in court, but in private, during a jailhouse interview, he admitted why. I owed 50 grand to the wrong people, he muttered. Gerald said it'd be easy money, just looking the other way. I never thought it'd go that far, but it had, and now he was ruined. With Gerald and Halverson in custody, only 2 remained, Raven and Sable. The task force shifted gears to manhunt mode. Checkpoints were set up across Arizona and Nevada. Their SUV was placed on Bolo, beyond the lookout, lists nationwide. Tips poured in. A woman in Las Vegas swore she saw Raven at a gas station. A rancher in Utah reported 3 strangers camping on his land. Each lead consumed precious hours. Meanwhile, the press fanned the flames. The Valkyries became near mythical. Headlines dubbed them the bombshell bandits. Talk shows debated whether women were less likely to commit violent crimes, and what it meant that this trio had terrorized a mother and child. Jennifer Cole watched from her living room, the blinds drawn. Emily slept beside her on the couch, clutching a stuffed bear. They're still out there, Jennifer whispered to Detective Leary during a check-in call. What if they come back? Leary reassured her, though privately he shared her fear. Raven wasn't the type to fade quietly. And sure enough, the final act was approaching. A violent showdown that would test everything the task force had built. Raven and Sable were ghosts. For 2 weeks after Gerald Whitman's arrest, surveillance came up empty. The SUV vanished. Credit cards were dead. No new storage units flagged. The trail seemed cold, until a sharp-eyed motel clerk outside Flagstaff called in a tip. 3 nights earlier, Two women checked into a roadside and using fake IDs. One tall, dark-haired, authoritative. The other smaller, jittery, constantly peeking through the blinds. Agents raced the scene. Inside the vacated room, they found cigarette butts, an empty whiskey bottle, and a map with circles drawn around small towns, possible hideouts, and a chilling note scrawled on motel stationery. No turning back. If they close and we make them pay. The Valkyries weren't surrendering. They were preparing for war. The task force shifted into overdrive. Roadblocks lined highways out of Arizona. Helicopters swept desert backroads. Federal marshals canvassed every pawn shop and gun store in 3 states. Jennifer Cole, still under protection, lived in quiet dread. "They're not finished," she told Detective Leary during a check-in. "I can feel it. Raven's not the kind to run forever." She was right. Raven was planning something audacious. The break came on a windy morning in New Mexico. A rancher spotted a black SUV hidden near an abandoned shack on his property. Suspicious, he called the sheriff. Within hours, federal agents descended. Leary was flown in. This was it. SWAT teams surrounded the shack. Drones buzzed overhead. A negotiator's voice echoed through a bullhorn. "Victoria, hail Raven. This is law enforcement. Come out with your hands up." Silence. Then from inside, Sable's trembling voice. "We're not going back. You'll kill us first." A shot rang out, wild, from inside the shack. Dust exploded from the ground near an armored vehicle. The standoff had begun. For 6 tense hours, the desert was a war zone of nerves. Agents crouched behind cover. Reporters gathered a mile away, broadcasting live. Across America, viewers watched the saga's climax unfold in real time. Negotiators tried everything. Appeals to reason, promises of safety, even a taped message from Dana, Fox, urging her former partners to give up. Raven's response came sharp through a bullhorn. "Fox betrayed us. She was never one of us." Inside, tensions cracked. Sable sobbed uncontrollably, panicked at the encirclement. Raven slapped her, demanding focus. Witnesses later said it sounded like a powder keg, one spark away from detonation. And then it happened. Sable stumbled out the front door, hands raised, screaming, "I'm done. I'm done." Agents rushed in, pulling her to safety. She collapsed, begging them not to let Raven shoot her. Seconds later, gunfire erupted from the shack. Raven burst to the back, rifle in hand, firing wildly as she sprinted toward the desert scrub. The chase lasted less than 3 minutes. Snipers fired 2 controlled shots. Raven collapsed, hit in the shoulder and leg, weapons skidding across the sand. She was alive, but barely. The Valkyries were finished. The courtroom months later was packed. Victims, reporters, townspeople, they all came to watch justice unfold. The defendants sat at 2 tables. Gerald Whitman, stone-faced. Deputy Halverson, gaunt and ashamed. Sable, pale and withdrawn. And Raven, her arm still in a sling, glaring defiantly. Dana Price, already in protective custody, testified for the prosecution. Her voice shook as she described the planning meetings, Gerald's bitterness, Halverson's tips, Raven's obsession with control. Jennifer Cole also took the stand. She recounted the night of the home invasion, her voice breaking when she described Emily's tears as the bomb was taped to her chest. The jury wiped their eyes. Even hardened court officers were moved. The defense scrambled. Gerald's attorney painted him as a scapegoat, a washed-up banker blamed for others' violence. Halverson's lawyer pleaded desperation, a man drowning in debt who never knew how far would go. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, storage locker contents, witness testimony, financial trails. Piece by piece, the prosecution built an airtight case. When Raven took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. She smirked at the prosecutor's questions, dodged responsibility, and at one point leaned toward the jury. "You think locking me up changes anything? There will always be others like me. You live in fear every day. You just don't admit it." Her words sent chills through the room. The jury deliberated only 8 hours. Verdicts: Gerald Whitman, guilty on all counts. conspiracy, armed robbery, kidnapping. Deputy Halverson, guilty, aiding and abetting corruption, conspiracy. Sable Cortez, guilty, kidnapping, armed robbery, but with reduced sentencing recommendation due to cooperation. Ravenhale, guilty on all counts, with enhancements for firearms and violence. Sentences were harsh. Gerald received 35 years. Halverson, 25. Sable, 15. Raven, life without parole. The Valkyries were finally caged. For Jennifer and Emily, closure was complicated. On paper, justice was done. The criminals were behind bars. The threat was gone, but trauma lingered. Emily woke screaming from nightmares of ticking bombs. Jennifer struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering if she had done enough to protect her daughter. Therapy sessions became their lifeline. The community, too, bore scars. Glendale residents, once trusting, now looked twice at strangers. Parents double-checked locks at night. And the sheriff's office faced an uphill climb to rebuild trust after Halverson's betrayal. Still, there were signs of resilience. At a candlelight vigil outside Glendale Federal Credit Union, neighbors lit lanterns for healing. Jennifer stood with Emily beside her, the little girl clutching her hand. "Fear doesn't win," Jennifer whispered to the crowd. "We do, by living, by loving, by refusing to be broken." Her words carried weight. Years later, criminologists studied the case as a chilling example of hybrid crime. Part home invasion, part inside job robbery, part psychological warfare. The Valkyries were unique not only for their gender but for their methods, weaponizing terror without real explosives, exploiting both personal trauma and institutional weaknesses. The case prompted reforms. Banks upgraded security, restricting insider access. Police departments tightened oversight of officers' finances to flag vulnerabilities like Halverson's gambling debts. For Jennifer and Emily, the ordeal shaped the rest of their lives. Emily grew into an advocate for child victims of crime, speaking publicly about resilience. Jennifer eventually left banking, becoming a counselor for trauma survivors. As for the Valkyries, their legend lingered in crime lore. Documentaries, podcasts, even dramatized TV specials dissected their methods and motives. Ravenhale's chilling courtroom quote, "You live in fear every day. You just don't admit it," became infamous. But in Glendale, the story was simpler. It was about a mother and daughter who survived, about a community that, scarred but steadfast, refused to let terror define them. The Valkyries had sought power through fear. In the end, what endured was courage. In the quiet suburb of Glendale, California, a mother and child once lived an ordinary life. Until one night in 2000, their world was shattered by the unthinkable. 3 women, masking themselves not only with ski masks but with twisted ideals, turned Jennifer Cole's home into a prison, her daughter into leverage, and fear into a weapon. What began as a calculated bank robbery spiraled into one of the most shocking criminal conspiracies in modern memory. But the story of the Valkyries was never just about the money. It was about betrayal. By a disgraced bank manager consumed by bitterness, by a deputy sworn to protect his community, but undone by his own weakness, and by a trio of women who believed terror could be their path to power. In the end, their scheme collapsed under its own weight. The lies unraveled, the alliances fractured, and the justice system brought them down. Ravenhale, the so-called commander of the Valkyries, will never walk free again. Gerald Whitman and Deputy Halverson will grow old behind prison walls. Sable Cortez will serve her time, haunted by what she chose to become. For Jennifer and Emily Cole, survival was victory, but healing took years. Their courage in the face of unimaginable fear became a testament to resilience, and their voices, once trembling in terror, became a rallying cry for change. The legacy of the Valkyries reached far beyond Glendale. Banks nationwide tightened security protocols. Law enforcement agencies began watching their own more carefully, ensuring that those sworn to serve could not so easily be compromised. And criminologists held the case up as a warning. That crime evolves, that terror can be homegrown, and that sometimes the most dangerous threats were faces we least expect. Perhaps the greatest lesson came not from the criminals, but from the victims. Jennifer and Emily prove that even when fear is forced upon us, when our lives are wired with threats, when the walls close in, we can endure. We can fight back. We can reclaim our lives. The Valkyries believed they could choose who lived in fear. But fear is temporary. Courage endures. And in the end, that is how Glendale won.